Just for context, Paige has started and is using prep time.
Okay, that's all the time I need. I have 53 seconds.
Okay, just keep track of that for yourself and start when you want to. Make sure to time yourself.
Yes. Okay, so before I begin, as a brief off-time roadmap, I'm just going to be addressing what our opponent said about our case, and then if time allows, I will be further going over our case. And so I will begin now. Okay, so first I'd like to address what our opponents said about Trump having more of an impact on our leadership than our actual human rights. I just wanted to finish the card that my partner had started reading in her speech that basically was that Trump doesn't thump human rights promotions. The next president can restore U.S. leadership. The United States, this was Schmidt 19, the United States must reckon with the disastrous human rights legacy that the Trump administration will leave behind. The next U.S. president should take a holistic view of protecting and defending human rights at home and around the world. This progressive approach would acknowledge the way that human rights in the United States would affect what its leaders can achieve abroad and would craft policies making progress on the fronts. And then I'm going to move to this next card. That says Congress checks even Republicans. This is Edward Wong 19. Human rights causes draw rare bipartisan support in Congress, and many Republican lawmakers have broken for Mr. Trump on that matter, even as they move in lockstep with the president on nearly every other issue. There's been a sense by some that the administration hasn't prioritized human rights in its broader foreign policy. That sense has grown. There's been a sense that Congress needs to step up. Congress passed legislation by unanimous consent supporting the Hong Kong protests, forcing Mr. Trump to sign the bill. Lawmakers this year also passed legislation recognizing that the 1915 killings of an estimated 1.5 million Armenians as a genocide over the objections of Mr. Trump, and they have approved a resolution calling for the end of military support in the war in Yemen, in which Saudi Arabia led coalition. I'm just going to cut the card there. Basically, what it's saying is that Trump is not impacting our leadership, and that it's more important for our respecting human rights to carry on our leadership. And then next I would like to go on that death penalty is not an effective or deterrent. As we said in our case, Americans should consider the studies showing that homicide rates increase where the death penalty is used and decrease where it is not used. Therefore, in our attempts to prevent crime with capital punishment, we are in fact encouraging it. So the death penalty is in fact not an effective punishment. And this is because lengthy, as we said in our case, lengthy delays determine both the deterrence and retributive rationales for the death penalty. A penalty that serves no useful purpose is therefore cruel. Therefore, these delays are making it not an effective deterrent, and therefore all that it's doing is just cruel. Next, I would like to go on to what our opponents said about terrorism. And I would like to say that strengthening human rights solves the root causes of terrorism, radicalization, and military interventions. This is Ballin 20. Citizens must be confident that they will not be confronted with state power or beyond. So basically what this card is saying is that because we are the United States, we need to respect these human rights so that we stay the bedrock of the liberal international order, which basically ensures that we are all of our countries are working together, and that when we're not working together, that it makes terrorist attacks much more likely to happen because we are weaker, we are not working together. So and yes, and I would also like to continue reading from that card, and it says that a rise from behavior that prevents itself is an outright denial of the validity of the constitutional law. So basically what it's saying is that without this rule and without this law, that terrorism is much more likely to happen. Next, I would like to move on about what our opponents said about global warming not posing a threat. Their card was from 2014, while our card was from 2019. A lot can change in 5 years. A lot is changing in 5 years. Like we said, there's only a short amount of time before this is irreversible. That means that a lot can happen in a short, very short amount of time. So basically, their card falls against climate change. Injections are painful and inhumane by Wazel 17. This was talking about the execution of Kenneth Williams. And what happens was where midazolam does not, it's a thing in lethal injections. It doesn't, and it doesn't work as anesthesia properly. And the sole purpose of the paralytic drug in the lethal injection. Next, I would like to talk about how they said the death penalty is low, but it doesn't matter because the impacts are extreme. That is all the time that I have.
Okay, I won't be taking any prep. Sorry, pulling up my timer. So I'm just going to be going over the points of this debate round and how we empirically won, as I should. Before I start, is anyone not ready or unmuted? All right, awesome. Let's begin. So first off, I would like to talk about our disadvantage. Our disadvantage basically posits that the death penalty acts as a deterrent for people against crime, and it does. It deters, and we have shown empirically that it does deter people from committing more crimes or even murder. I read in a card that for every single execution in a state, between 3 and 25 murders are stopped. And we have much more evidence showing this. So we empirically prove that it has deterred crime, and our opponents barely attack this, only keeping it on the flow. So this flows to our side. Moving on to innocence. More people that are innocent would be exonerated under the negatives plan. The negatives plan, or the negatives, or under having the death penalty. So the death penalty gives certain advantages to those that are there. Being on death row gives you better due process and more media exposure. So the Supreme Court will be less likely to execute innocent people. Under our plan, less innocent people will be executed and more innocent people will be exonerated. Moving on to international human rights. Other countries won't follow our example. The entire point of this advantage is that other countries will follow the US's example, but we're not trying to change the minds of countries that are already semi-moderate. We're not trying to change the UK or France's ideas on execution. We're trying to change the ideas of places like Saudi Arabia, and they've shown many, many times that they won't follow. America has equality for almost all people, although it may not be. Although this may be a problem in the United States, still they are actively attempting to work forward with this. Whereas in Saudi Arabia, women are not equal, and many other races are not equal. An example being many gay people are persecuted in that country, even killed and crucified. Now they won't follow us, so abolishing the death penalty on these grounds would only be negative for the United States and wouldn't change anything. So we won on warming and terror. Warming hasn't changed hasn't changed the amount of renewables. Warming hasn't changed. The amount of renewables has gone up since the last time. So the argument that the date of our pieces of evidence have changed things doesn't really matter. My opponent said that a lot has changed, but they didn't say which way it changed. It changed that more people are using renewable energy, and it's a much higher priority. As well, less people are using coal. So this flows to our side. It changing a lot is a good thing because it is less likely to hurt us. Also, in my evidence, it said that out of 4 situations, 3 had shown that it was if global warming were to occur in mass, it would not be as much of a problem as my opponents are saying. Moving on to terror, we basically disprove terror in the fact that terrorist organizations don't have the technological or skills to create nuclear weapons or obtain them. It's basically impossible for terrorists to obtain or use them, so this flows to our side. Moving on to soft power. Trump has completely sullied our current foreign view, and we have no influence since it's been falling for years. My opponent read a card that basically said the U.S. way of life or the U.S. Use of the Supreme Court has been falling for years. It's not being used as much of an example. So us destroying the death penalty under these grounds would only hurt us more. So the death penalty does deter and gives advantages to those who are innocent. As well, life without parole is more inhumane and cruel and unusual than death. Personally, if it were me, if I was on death row, I would rather die than spend the rest of my life in a concrete cage with a bunch of people that are extremely violent. Now, my opponents may say that death is the absolute worst. However, I would argue against this, that the majority of people would choose death instead of having to live, in many cases, the rest of the rest of our lives, upwards of 70 years, in a place that is extremely violent. So we win this debate on the basis of impacts. So my opponents are trying to say that the impacts of us abolishing the death penalty would be that other people would abolish the death penalty, and global warming and terror wouldn't happen as much, and we would have more power, and less innocent people would be killed. But we have disproven this on every single point. Less people would be killed if you vote for the negative. More people, it would be less likely for terror to happen if you vote for the negative. It wouldn't. Not less likely. Warming and terror are not impacts because they are non sequiturs in this round. Soft power wouldn't go up if we got rid of the death penalty. So basically, if you vote for the abolition of the death penalty, more people will spend their life in prison where they would rather have died. It's a terrible, terrible thing. And it is extremely inhumane and unconstitutional. So if you vote for the affirmative, you will be basically voting to abolish something that gives positives to those who are innocent on death row, won't change anything in the entire world political standpoint, and will cause more more pain and suffering. So in this, you must vote for the negative, so the United States can maintain the advantages for the innocent, keep people from life without parole, and give those advantages, and not have an economic decline. So for these reasons and many more, I urge a strong vote on the side of the negation.
I will be taking some prep time. Hold on, starting right now. I'll have to mute myself. Okay, so sorry, hold on. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I use 3 minutes and 24 seconds of prep time. And,
It doesn't matter. Just
okay. Is everybody ready?
yes.
Okay, then I'll begin. First of all, I'm going to start off with the fact that their cards are old and unreliable, specifically the global warming card. Their card is from 2014, and new evidence from 2019 directly contradicts their evidence, meaning that their attack on our global warming impact does not follow through. Next, they say that one of our pieces of evidence flows to their side, talking specifically about how the criminals would rather choose to live life in prison than choose the death penalty. What they're failing to understand is that their evidence instead flows to our side. It specifically stated that criminals would rather spend their life in prison for the rest of their lives than take the death penalty. It doesn't matter whether or not they're innocent or guilty. It matters that they're choosing the less torturous option, which directly flows to our side, further proving that lethal injection is more unethical. Speaking of unethical, they never said anything about the ethics of the death penalty, which means that they dropped our main impact, which is the constitutional amendment protecting prisoners from dying in such a way. Because they didn't say that it was unethical, they're basically conceding that they didn't talk about our impact, which means they're basically conceding the fact that it is cruel and unusual punishment because it is unethical. Sorry. Moving on, their terror card specifically said that there is a likelihood of terrorism. It may be small, but it's still there. The fact that it is still there and it's so simple, and that it's so simple for terrorists to cause nuclear terrorism is so huge. We directly said in one of our cards that even basic human error with people who aren't purposely trying to set off nuclear weapons, it can happen. I believe it said that there were weapons misfires or something like that. I might be wrong, so don't hold that against me. They also said that it would be way too sophisticated for terrorists to cause this kind of terrorism. Our card directly states that there are many unpurposeful ways to trigger the release of these nuclear weapons. This proves that it would be extremely simple. Sorry. Their card from 2009 also said that the death penalty was low, except for the fact that this card is from 11 years ago. They also tried to say that the low amount of death penalty cases were a deterrent from the death penalty when their card doesn't specify whether or not people were committing less crimes, which they can be charged for the death penalty for. It just says that there were less death penalty convictions. Because it doesn't specify whether or not it's less death penalty convictions or people committing less crimes, there is no possible way for us to realize if it's a deterrent from people committing crimes. Our piece of evidence directly showed that in countries with the death penalty, there was more homicides than in places without the death penalty. They said in their last speech that many people would rather die than live in prison, which is a direct contradiction to the card I talked about earlier. Our opponents also said that life in prison was horrible. I think it was a Shapiro card, so it wouldn't be that big of a deterrent for the death penalty. Sorry, that doesn't make sense. Our opponents also said in their Shapiro card that life in prison was horrible. And wouldn't that be a bigger deterrent than the death penalty? If life in prison is so horrible and torturous, people would rather not commit crimes because they have the chance of getting life in prison than the death penalty. Finally, I will be talking about soft power. They said that soft power was only caused by Trump and not caused by human rights. Yet because of the election, the idea that soft power can never be restored is ridiculous. We read a card directly proving that it is instead caused by human rights. We read another card saying that Trump wasn't necessary. We could always restore our power if Trump gets out of office. Just going over what happened throughout the debate, our opponents dropped the ethics argument, which means they concede that point, which further on means that they concede the point that lethal injection is unethical and unconstitutional. Prisoners are people, they have their constitutional rights, which means we have to abide by those. And by giving the government a way to legally kill these people, it's not proving good for other countries. And we also went on the impacts because their global warming card falls, like I said before. Our card directly proves that terrorism can happen because basic human error can happen. They also tried to say that other countries do not follow in our lead, but in the first card we read, it says that they will. I believe that card was also from 2009. It says that someone in Israel, the Supreme Court in Israel based their changes on what our Constitution did and what our Supreme Court did. So for these reasons and many more, I strongly urge a vote for the affirmation. And that is all the time I have. So really well.
All right, this concludes the round.
All right, I will stop recording in 3, 2,